Hi guys, welcome back to another video or your first video. Welcome if you're new here and welcome either way. This is going to be my sort of reading in review video. I'm going to be doing the reading survey tag and there are 20 questions. A lot of the answers you can probably already get from other videos that I either have filmed or I'm going to be filming, but this is sort of like a really good comparable tag to the mid-year book freakout tag. So let's get into the questions. So the first question is, how many books did you read? And I read 102, which is something I'm really happy with, considering that my goal was 100 and that I had several months in the middle of the year where I didn't want to read anything. I think I did read a lot of very, very short books to make it up to 100. So moving forward, I'm going to try and just read what I want to read regardless of length and, stuff the Goodreads goal. Question 2 is, how many pages did you read? So I read 18,721, which is my lowest number of pages I've ever read since tracking that statistic, but I'm going to be filming an entire other statistics video, so I'm sure I'll go into more of that later. But again, I think I was just reading a lot shorter books last year, and I like short fiction, I like doing that, but I think I was doing that to make up my Goodreads goal, so I do want to try, as I said, prioritise books that I just want to read. Question number 3 is my most read genre, which was fantasy. I always answer this when people ask me that because it tends to be what I end up picking up, but with what I was reading, and looking at my Goodreads shelf, I was like, I wonder whether or not I've managed to keep that my most read genre just with what I was reading. So I tabulated it all a couple of nights ago, and yes, fantasy ended up being my most read genre yet again. Next question was your favourite new release, and I don't pick up new releases like when they come out. I don't keep a track of when new releases are coming out just because I'm trying to get through my physical TBR shelf. So what I do is I put things that are going to come out this year onto my to buy shelf, and if I see it in a charity shop or for cheap, then I do pick it up, but I don't tend to buy new releases on their release date. However, I did get to a couple 2021 releases in 2021. One of those is Constellations by Nick Payne. Now, this came out in 2021. I went to see the play being performed, and they were selling the copies of the script in their merchandise stall, which I really hope more shows start doing because I think it's a great way to sell copies of the script. And so many times, if you miss a line or you miss a joke and you're like, oh, I didn't quite understand where that thing came from or what happened, you can then just read the script and find out what you missed. So this play is about multiple dimensions, but the characters don't know they're sort of in multiple dimensions. It's very hard to explain, but it's about a couple's relationship and following the same two people had they made completely different choices. So the story keeps on branching off, and this was just such a masterclass in how to create a character because the audience had to be aware of what storyline we were following when it was the same actor, same costume, same everything, and they were on the stage all the time. They didn't go and change or anything. So it was really, really fascinating, and I would highly recommend this. Next question is what was your favourite older title? And that has to be Wicked by Gregory I can't speak today. Gregory Maguire. I read this and I was about to say, if you've seen my favourites video of the year, me being a big dum-dum deleted the footage after I'd already edited it, so I'm going to have to refilm that. But to give you a sneak peek, this made it to my absolute favourite spot of the year. I loved it. I'm sure everyone knows the plot of this by now, but I will just synopsise. It is a retelling of the Wizard of Oz story by L. Frank Baum, and it follows the witches of the story, and it's sort of a prequel to the Wizard of Oz story. And this book, I finished it, and I have not stopped thinking about it since I finished it. The characters were so complex, everyone was really multidimensional. It follows a huge period of time, but it didn't feel like too long of a book, and it just said so many interesting things. I'm definitely going to reread it. And yeah, it was just such a good book. Very, very highly recommend. Next question is a book that lived up to the hype, and that I'm going to say Wicked as well. It was amazing, and I think because of the musical, the book has got a lot of hype, some of it good, some of it bad. So I think it lived up to that. I think it was really, really good. Next is a book that didn't live up to the hype. So this answer is going to be The Caretaker by Harold Pinter. So again, theatre snobs, please don't come for me. I know that Harold Pinter is a very well respected playwright. There's a theatre named after him in the West End. He's very well loved. I hated The Caretaker. I really hated it. I hated how it was done. I hated the characters. I thought the premise was remarkable. I thought it was really good, but I just don't get the hype. I don't like how it was done, and I think that anything below a excellent actor would just be a really weird and uncomfortable viewing experience as an audience member. So no. I hated it. The next question is the book that felt like the biggest accomplishment. So normally people answer really, really long books for this, and I didn't read anything super long this year, so I can't really answer a long book. So I'm going to be answering with And the Ocean Was Our Sky by Patrick Ness. And really, this book just felt like a huge accomplishment because of the fact that I wanted to DNF it at so many points, and I pushed my way through thinking it would get better, and it didn't. It was just like, I think that he had a really interesting concept, or several really interesting concepts, and there were too many of them in too short of an amount of time to really develop a story. It's essentially a retelling of Moby Dick, but from the perspective of the whale, which I think in itself would have been an interesting take, but it's also so far into the future that whales have started building tools and started communicating with humans and started enslaving other species, and there's bizarre technology and things that have happened to the planet. I think that it was meant to be a commentary on the destruction we're doing to our oceans, which I think, great that commentary is being said. I just think too much happening in too short of a time, and it felt like a real accomplishment to finish it. Is the next book reachable? The next question is favourite new characters, and that is the characters from The Daughter of Smoke and Bone, or just Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I read this for the first time this year. It's an older release, but it was absolutely brilliant. This, I feel like, is the epitome of what a paranormal romance should be and should have been in its heyday. I will absolutely still be recommending this to new readers. I think it absolutely holds up, and the characters in here were so good. The main character wasn't just this blonde or brunette girl who didn't think she was pretty and is just a wet blanket who's an insert for the reader. She had bright blue hair, she had tattoos, she not single-minded, that's not the word I'm looking for. She was determined, and she had her opinions, and she didn't let other people step on her, and she was brilliant. And also the side characters actually had things to do in the plot. They were their own people. Susanna, I think, is one of the best best friend characters of a main character that I've ever read. She was hilarious. I think that she was so, you could really tell why they were friends, and she was so supportive, and she had her own relationships and her own life, and they were just great, and I really, really enjoyed both the characters and the plot of this. I'm still making my way through the second book in the series. I took a little bit of a break from it to read some other things, but I'm still really, really loving it. So, characters in here, excellent. So, the matching question to that is least favourite characters of the year, and for that I'm going to have to say the whole cast of the play DNA. I don't think I have the copy anymore. I think I gave it away. It was my least favourite book, or one of my least favourites of 2020. It was also one of my least favourites of 2021. I read it with some friends because of the fact that we had fun tearing it to absolute shreds because it's awful. And just, yeah, you can't tell any of the characters apart. Far too many of them. They don't talk like normal humans because they never finish a sentence, and all of them are just vile, and yeah. And the next question is the most shocking moment in a book, and for that I'm also going to answer Daughter of Smoke and Bone. Again, the ending of this, for me, had the similar shock moment to the ending of The Raven Boys, which is, The Raven Cycle is one of my 2 top favourite series of all time, and the ending of this just made me go, wait, no, oh no. And I was like, I had stayed up late finishing this, thinking, right, I just need to know what happens and I'll put the book down and go to sleep. And I just like held the book on my chest and I was lying there and just, I couldn't stop thinking about it and how much it changed everything that went on in here. I'm not going to say anything because I do not want to spoil it, but I was so taken aback, and I will be thinking about this book for the rest of the time. The next question is my favourite new writing, and for that I have to go with Sappho. So Sappho, if you don't know, is an ancient Greek poet, and she is very, very well known as, one, an amazing poet and one of the best poets that we've ever had, but also because most of her poetry is about how much she's in love with women. And so I read 2 books of her poetry last year, and I'm currently reading a book which is not so much about her poetry but more about her and her life. And something that I found in that book, which I just found so hilarious, is that people are so like adamant that she was straight that they kept on coming up with sort of new love interests that she would have had. Most of them didn't even live in the same century as her. So I just find that fact hilarious. And I got quite intimidated to pick anything of hers up because I thought it would be too complex for me to understand. But with the translations, I think that she has to be one of my favourite poets. I haven't read a lot of poetry, but I think it's really good. And yeah, favourite new style of writing. The next question is the book that I pushed the most people to read, and that would have to be No More Plastic. Now, I don't have a lot of subscribers. I'm fairly new to BookTube, so this isn't sort of... I don't think that I will have pushed a lot of people to read or not read certain books that I've recommended. And so I took this question as a book that I have pushed other people in my real life to read, and that would have to be No More Plastic. I think that it was very practical, it gave very, very easy steps, it didn't talk down to the reader. I just thought it was a very well-rounded book, and I have given it to multiple people, multiple friends, multiple family members who've read it, and I'm continuing to pass it along. For new favourite author, I am going to have to also say Sappho. I don't want to label someone a favourite author until I read quite a number of their books, and a lot of the books that I really enjoyed, I don't want to call a new favourite author because I haven't read a lot more from them, whereas Sappho, I did read several of her poetry collections, and I just think they're great, and I will continue to look out for things even though there are only scraps really left of her poetry. So much of it was stored in the Library of Alexandria, which got burnt down, so we only have a little bit to go on. No, the next book isn't reachable, so I will just pop up a picture. So the next question is book that I will be recommending the most. Is that how it's worded? Yeah. The book I will be recommending the most, and that will have to be Superbugs, An Arms Race Against Bacteria. Again, I don't think this is the sort of book that will have mass appeal to a wide audience. However, because of the field that I'm in, this book talked about resistance to antimicrobials, which is the field that I'm currently working in and doing research in. So I personally think that I will be recommending this to a lot of my lab group and wider community just in general, because I think it talked about a lot of really interesting things. It raised a lot of issues which we already knew were happening, but also it gave a lot of very comprehensible solutions to a lot of these problems, which not a lot of fiction about this topic does. So I think that I will be continuing to recommend this book. The next question is your favourite cover. This has to be The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Snow. I trip over that title every time I say it, but just look at this cover. It's so amazing. It's just gorgeous, and I definitely will be picking up a copy of my own to have on my shelf because it's just stunning, and I really enjoyed it, so there's that. The next question is a book that made you cry. Now, I don't tend to cry while reading books at all. However, I just took this question to be like the book that really made me sad and emotional rather than like outright crying. And for that, I had to say In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This one had a really deep impact on me. Her Body and Other Parties is a book that went around BookTube a couple of years ago, and it was really, really polarising. Some people absolutely loved it, and some people absolutely hated it. After reading this, I would be interested to give that a go. And this is really not the sort of book I typically like or get into very easily. I tend to really struggle getting into books that have a very strong reliance on metaphor and very flowery writing. However, and I think that if I didn't read this via audiobook, I think I would have really struggled to get into it and read it. But the fact that I listened to it via audiobook, I could really appreciate what it was saying. And this is such a interesting look at how someone can fall into an abusive relationship and how much that can affect you. I think so many of the writing choices in here are indicative of the subject matter. Like, how it's narrated feels very scattered and also very distant, and I feel like that was done on purpose, as that tends to be the way someone can respond to deal with this sort of trauma, and I just think it was just done so well. I think that each of the titles of the chapters sort of gives you an idea of the tone of the chapter going in. Like, it doesn't really tell you what's going on, but like one of the chapter titles is Dream House as Stoner Comedy, Dream House as Legacy, Dream House as Choose Your Own Adventure. Like, I don't think this will have mass appeal, and I think that if you have been through an abusive relationship, especially a manipulative abusive relationship, I would tread with caution with this, but I do think it was done very, very well. So I would highly recommend this, and it really sort of stuck out to me and made me very emotional. So highly recommend. Didn't make me cry, but yeah. And the next question, if you couldn't already guess, was a book that made you laugh. And because they're on my top shelf, I'm not going to go grab them, but it's the entire Red Air series. This is a series that sort of takes fantasy tropes and just pokes fun at them. It's not a serious like fantasy novel, but I had such a fun time reading it. The first book is essentially a quest novel where two people who both look very similar get busted out of jail together because of the fact that the rescue party arrives and can't tell which of the boys they're supposed to rescue, so rescue both, and the hijinks that ensue. It's just so fun, and I was laughing out loud at multiple points during this. Ooh, one other one that I am also going to mention, just because I laughed so hard that my dog came to see what the hell was happening because I was just laughing that much out loud, and that is in the last book in the Percy Jackson series. Is it called The Last Olympian? Yes, The Last Olympian. Oh, I can just get it for you. There is a line in here that I quite literally had to stop reading, put the book down, and laugh until I cried. And for those of you who have read it, it's the peanut butter joke. and it took me so off guard that I was just in hysterics. So I don't think that spoils anything, but this one as well. So the penultimate question is favourite reread, which has to be Eric, which I reread multiple times this year. I love this book so much. I love Terry Pratchett so much. He's one of my favourite authors out there, and I haven't read his whole series, but I'm slowly working my way through them. Eric is just, it never fails to put me in a good mood. It's just such a good book. I feel like I've pitched this a number of times throughout the year because of how many times I've reread it. But if you haven't heard of this book, it's about Rincewind, a character from a previous novel, who he gets trapped elsewhere, somewhere, and him and his walking luggage are trying to get back to the disc world, and they have the help of a demon summoner, and they might have the devil after them. So this is just so good. Super short as well. It's one of the shorter Discworld novels, but it's just fantastic. I would highly recommend. And the last question, which I'm going to talk about very fast because my editing software hates when I have videos over half an hour. And that is Binge by Tyler Oakley, which I am using for the question of biggest surprise. I picked this up because of the fact that it was £1. I'd heard of it, I knew that it was going to be talking about queer issues, and it wasn't particularly high on my radar. However, I saw it for £1 in Waterstones because it is super thrashed. I don't know what they did to it, and it was £1, and I needed a book to read over December. I just wanted some chill time, and so I ended up picking this up, and I was so surprised by how much I loved it, which I shouldn't have been. That sounds rude, but I loved this so much. It was so open and honest and moving and funny, and talked about some serious issues, but also never failed to entertain. And this is coming from someone who's probably watched about 2 videos of Tyler Oakley's over my entire life, so I'm definitely going to be going back to watch a lot of his YouTube stuff because of the fact that this was really good, and I would highly recommend. So there you have it. That is my 2021 reading in review. I would love to hear your answers to some of these questions down below. What I'll do is I'll make a pinned comment and I will share all the questions so that you guys can answer them down in the comments below. But I will see you in my next video. Bye!